Hey, welcome to the SermonMax Podcast. It is great to have you here. We are all about helping leaders advance their church while staying sane. And today we're going to talk about a topic that's critical to making that happen, and that is staffing. There's the old adage, you hire slow, you fire fast. There's a reason for that, because hiring the right people is absolutely critical. And today we have an expert in that topic, Dan Martin. He is an executive recruiter, and he's also been a campus pastor for years at Chase Oaks Church. And man, he is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to hiring the right people. One of the things he did so well at Chase Oaks is have a great team, hire the right people. And now he's taken that and really helping churches do that as well. So Dan, it's just great to have you here.
Kenny, thanks so much. And thanks for that kind introduction. A little kinder than reality maybe, but no.
Aren't they all?
Yeah.
I think I wish my wife would hear it. Hear someone introduce me and then actually, oh, wow, he's actually that person.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to play this for my wife later just to make sure and say, hey, did you hear what Kenny said about me? So
that's right. Absolutely. I'll make it longer in the next versions. Hey, Dan, so when we think about staffing and bringing people on, the first thing I think most of us think about is hiring, right? Because that's the key moment. I think when it comes to churches, that is the moment. And I know I look back at my days either as a church planner or as an executive pastor at a large church. Those hires are strategic, catalytic moments, and you got to get them right. And because if you get them wrong, man, you can create culture challenges, all those things that you and I have seen happen 100 times and lose momentum as a church. So when you think about when you show up to a church, you're walking them through the process. What is the best practices? What are the framework you use to help them get started in this process?
Yeah, I think it begins with a mindset, and it's what you alluded to at the beginning when you said hire slowly. The first thing is, I think, a mistake that many churches make right up front is they hire too quickly. They either have somebody in mind or the house is burning down. We've got to get somebody here now. So I just say from the very beginning, patience is probably one of the most important things that a hiring manager can do or possess, is because you get that wrong, you get that hire wrong, and to your point, things can go south quickly and really turn into a mess. And slow down the process, be patient. And the other thing I say all the time to pastors as they're talking about, should we engage with a recruiter or should we just try to find somebody internally, is, hey, absolutely exhaust your network, exhaust people that are internal, people that who know people. Once that happens, then the process starts, right? Back to your question, what does the process look like? So with the patience in mind, I would say it begins with a really good job description. Number one, what do we need done? And that, again, when you get that wrong and out of order, if you start with a person, I have someone in mind who would be great at this role, you will disrupt the health of that process. And the beginning of the process is a very detailed and specific job description before you start thinking about or talking to any candidates, is make sure that you and your team have that as your roadmap, and that you put people in charge. You create almost a committee. That committee might be one or two people, or it could be 5 people. And the committee's job is to make sure that you're following the road track, the roadmap. And the job description is the roadmap.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, to be honest, right, even as an executive pastor, job descriptions whip me. It's that, because I'm a fast guy, right? I want to go and let's get together and have a committee meeting on a job description, and it turns out to be 2 or 3 meetings or whatever. And at the same time, every time that I've skipped that process, it has burned me, as you just talked about. Yeah. How do you recommend really understanding what you need in that role? Because that's Greg Ligon, a friend of both of ours, was on last week. He said when they're helping people talk about succession, the challenge they run into is a lot of times they say, man, Bob was amazing and we need another Bob. Yeah. And in turn, they don't need another Bob. They need somebody different. I know when I was leading the church, the people who often got us where we were going got us where we were wasn't going to get us where we needed to go. How do you help Or how do you recommend people unpacking what they really need in that role and not just pulling out the old job description and saying, here you go?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to a church. I was actually on site with a church that I'm doing a search for this weekend. And one of the things that I do with the churches I work with is I spend 3 days with them and just really trying to exhaust what they're looking for. Kind of an outside person coming in fresh with fresh eyes. It's interesting because this is unusual, but what I heard coming out of that was this person that we're filling, this role that we're filling, is what we want is more of the same. Now, that's very different because typically there is something that you want to change as a result of this. So knowing where you're going, again, this goes back to the roadmap, the job description, is let's pull, if it's more of the same, like we want someone who's going to take what we're doing and we want them to do more of the same, just do it very well. Then the job description might be, let's pull out an old job description and let's tweak it. Most of the time, though, what I hear from pastors is, yeah, they were great at their role, the person who was in that role before, but what we'd love to see is this. I was working with a student pastor role not too long ago, and it was like, man, this person that we had in that role was great at discipleship. They were awesome at discipleship. They would hit a home run. They lacked maybe a little bit of the fun, of the energy that we could have brought. And so I'm like, hey, let's make sure that shows up in the job description. We actually took out their old job description. And one of the things that we put in the beginning, the paragraph description, was energetic, fun, dynamic, who loves discipleship. We kept discipleship in there because it's a very high value. But the roadmap that we were creating, the person that we were going to go after really was the first thing they're going to see on that job description is energy, fun, dynamic, engaging with students, that type of thing, versus them getting somebody who's going to be maybe a book nerd or somebody who's going to be really high in theology and discipleship, but they're not bringing that element. And so again, that goes to tweaking and redoing the job description to make sure we're pulling those things out of there before we go talk to people, before we go recruiting, before we go trying to fill the position, because we've got to have somebody in there right away. Let's make sure that we're getting it right, and let's make sure we're emphasizing the things that are most important.
Yeah, that's good. I think so often we forget that this hire is going to fit on a team of some sort, right? And so often when you take a guy, a student pastor, senior pastor, and they have been more of a teacher, not quite as fun type side, they've probably many times surrounded themselves with people just like that. And so when you make this shift, I think sometimes there's this question of, hey, we got to make sure we keep this value of discipleship. Well, typically there's people all around them who already have that value. And what you need is somebody who can bring some fun. I remember hiring somebody on my teams one time who I literally wanted, they're just fun to be around. And our team needs a little more fun. And they did. They brought more fun. And I just knew we needed a culture shift in that. But I think at times we get concerned, like, man, we value discipleship, and does this need to be, or value whatever, reaching people? It could be any of those skills. And we forget that they're part of a team and making sure, but they do, if they're going to be part of that team effectively, right, they have to still value discipleship and use that because if not, they're going to be a fish out of water when it comes to team fit and all those type things.
The other thing I would say, Kenny, just in that, as you're working through the job description and even thinking through the role, is also define, and I'll steal this from Larry Osborne. I heard this from Larry Osborne, and I love this. Do you need to hire a shepherd, or do you need to hire a leader? Because those two things can be very different. A shepherd is going to give you more of the same. A shepherd is going to do a great job of, hey, we've already created this great team. We need somebody to come in and manage the team. We need someone to come in and create just an environment that's a great environment to work on, to all of that. However, if you want to make some drastic changes, you don't need to hire a shepherd. You need to hire a leader. A leader is going to, they're going to also have some shepherding skills, hopefully, if they're working in a church environment.
Right.
But the leader part is you need them to be a change agent. You need them to drive change in your organization for whatever role they're filling. And determining, even doing some personality testing, doing some really deep questioning in your interview process to move towards that. Like a leader is going to, when they incur resistance, when they come up against resistance, they're going to be able to fight through the resistance to get to where you ultimately want them to go. A shepherd, on the other hand, when they hit resistance, they're going to be more likely to pull back, look for consensus in the group. They don't want to anger anybody. And so it's, do we want more of the same? Then maybe we need a shepherd. Do we want to drive change? Let's make sure we're hiring a leader, and then let's craft our interview process around a leader versus crafting our interview process around a shepherd.
Yeah. I think that's a huge takeaway. And both are huge.
You have to have both.
You got to have both. They're both significant in depending. It's a situational leadership stuff. I remember Michael Porter would talk about key roles when you're hiring. And I remember reading one time where he said, if you're trying to slow down the organization, and people are like, why would you ever slow down the organization? It's grown so fast. He said the way to do that naturally is to put the CFO in charge. And they're going to naturally start putting systems and structures and slow it down, create stability, and then you're going to make a change. But he said, that's just a natural governor that you can do. And I was like, man, that's just genius. Hearing you the same way. It's like, you need a shepherd, you need a leader. You need both. And there's just different seasons of ministry when you can leverage those skill sets.
Yeah.
Walk me. So I was a church plant guy as well as a large church guy, executive pastor. And I remember when we planted, we went through a season of, we hired all of our internal candidates. They were all internal people we knew really well. And all of a sudden then we started talking about external candidates. And do we need to start looking outside? And that was a big shift. And I think for many people watching this, they may not have hired an external person before. When do you know it's time to make that shift to starting to look external?
Yeah, let me back up a second because something came to mind as you were talking, and then I'll move to how do you know when to go outside. There's two different approaches on an internal candidate versus an external candidate. Like, what is the priority? What should be at the top of the list and priorities in the hiring process? If it's an internal candidate, competency probably needs to be the highest value that you're looking for. If it's an external candidate, it's probably culture fit. And the reason I mentioned that, internal hires, they're already at your church. They already understand culture. They're there because of the culture of the church. And so really where internal hires go wrong is, but Bob's a great guy. Can Bob do the job though? And that's where somebody can come in and really, hey, but is Bob competent? Does he have the skills? Is he really going to be able to do this job the best that we need it done for our church? So competency
is really the best candidate, right?
Yes, yeah, because Bob, right? Bob goes to your church. Bob's going to have his feelings hurt if you don't hire him. And so competency is what the interview process really needs to focus on. When it's an external hire, the competency piece is second because culture is the number one issue for an external hire. Like, you got to get the culture piece right. If they can do the job and they're the best at it from a competence level, but they don't fit your culture, it's going to be a train wreck. That becomes the top value in the hiring process when you go external. Now, back to your point, how do you know, or back to your question, how do you know when you need to go, hey, is this an internal hire or is this an external hire? I would say part of that has to do with, this goes back to the roadmap. What job do you need done? Where's the church going from we need to take this to another level. Like, we've been doing really good at this level. We need to go to this level. Typically, that's going to be an external hire. Typically. That doesn't mean that if it's an executive pastor role, you hear these things all the time. It's, we've got Sally in our church who is running a company, and now Sally feels the call of ministry on her life. She's going to make an incredible executive pastor, right? That's very rare, though, that you're going to find somebody that's going to be able to make that jump. For that kind of role, if you don't have that person in your mix, then an external hire is where you go. And again, it goes back to this: exhaust your network. Talk to who knows people, other pastors that are in your network, all of that. That I would even consider internal to the most part when it's within your network. Where we come in for a search firm like Group 139, where we typically come in and where we're able to help churches is when they've exhausted that network. Listen, we've been looking for somebody for 6 months. We've had 40 candidates, and not one of them have the competency that we need. And typically it's there. And what I would say, and this might sound a little self-serving, but they probably needed to engage with a recruiter from the very beginning. That would have saved them so much time, so much energy, so much money. When you think about the staff time that it takes to interview, to go through resumes, to get there, they probably should have done that from the beginning. And really, it goes back to that job description. What are the competency levels that we need? And we don't have that internally. We need to go outside. This role is too important for us to get this wrong, and we need to open this up to a nationwide search, not just a geographical search.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying there is you really got to you want to exhaust your resources, and then it's time to start thinking external, or you're looking for that leader that Larry Bosborn said that you really don't have. Many times I think internal hires are shepherds. They're not always shepherds, but many times I think they are shepherds, and they serve a purpose. It's a great purpose, but typically they're not competent. Many times they're not competent to go to the next level. And that's probably the time to think about an external hire.
Yeah.
So let me switch gears a little bit on you. So for many people watching, they're going to be senior pastors, and I'm going to say the most strategic hire they make is their executive pastor. If you're talking to a senior pastor right now and he's thinking about, or she's thinking about hiring their executive pastor, when do they know it's the right time? And really, what should they be looking for once they determine, okay, this is the time we need to do it? Then what?
Yeah, that's a very complicated question. We could probably spend an entire podcast just talking about that. But I would say, Number one, it's a critical hire, because the relationship of senior pastor to executive pastor is the most important kind of staff relationship that you have, and probably within your church. It's got to be a very complementary relationship, right? The senior pastor, there's so many times where the senior pastor almost sometimes in an unhealthy church will feel threatened by the executive pastor, and that can't happen. And so that hire is so critical. But I would,
and I've seen them where I've seen them dumb down the role in order not to be a threat. And and that's problematic. They're going to naturally lean to somebody that they're superior, like they're actually much more competent than, because they're just concerned and threatened. Now, I think that's a typical challenge for many senior pastors. They're not used to a high level leader be next to them and starting to run, questioning them, and not realizing that questions doesn't mean we don't support. It just means we're trying to make it better. But I think so many times there's a tension of who runs what. And I think that's one of the initial tensions that senior and executive pastors have and probably ongoing is who's running what pieces. So sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. One of the things that we like to do when we get involved with an executive pastor search, especially if it's a first-time executive pastor or even replacing a long-standing, somebody's retiring, whatever that might be, this is where I think an outside voice can be really beneficial, because we don't have any skin in the game, right? Like when we come in and consult with a senior pastor about an executive pastor role, we can ask the really hard questions. We can also determine, what is this senior pastor really good at? And what does this senior pastor need to let go of? And we can give that feedback. And sometimes it's a fight. It's, oh, wait a minute, I'm really good at that. Don't tell me I'm not. But it's an outside voice coming in and saying, hey, let's create and craft this position around areas that you need support, areas that you maybe either aren't interested in developing, or these are not natural gifts for you. Hey, you're a great communicator. You're a visionary. We need somebody, though, who's going to be willing to get down into the weeds and help you with overseeing staff. somebody who's going to oversee finances, all of those things. And when you look at it, I love this kind of the evolution of the executive pastor role has really become it's not just executive pastor anymore, right? It's executive pastor of operations, or it's executive pastor of ministry. And so really trying to help a church, a senior pastor, identify and hone in on what are we looking for in an executive pastor. Number one, it's got to be somebody you trust wholeheartedly. It's got to be somebody who's okay in the number 2 seat. And it's got to be somebody who's going to come in and do some of the things for you. He or she's going to take some of those things off of your plate and is going to allow you to do what you're really good at, and you to let go of some of those other things that you don't even realize you're not very good at.
Right.
You founded this church and the staff has always reported to you. Now, as we grow and as we're growing as a church, we now need somebody who will come in and really do that, really invest the time with the staff that the staff needs. And so that's just initial thoughts on that role.
No, I think you named a lot of it, a trust component, followed by just some of the competency questions that you got to make sure they have. I think just identifying, I think it's interesting, this whole theme through this whole podcast is knowing your starting point. And I think many people miss that component. We are all focused on where we want to go, but many times we don't know where we're at. And even when you talked about executive pastor hire, it's, hey, what is your skill set? What are you good at? And for real, what are you good at? Right. And then let's hire around it to make you more successful. I remember Jeff Jones, the senior pastor at Chase Oaks, way back. I remember him making a comment of big stick. What's your big stick? He felt like everybody on staff should have a big stick. And the big stick was basically defined as the thing that only you could do. And you need to know in your role, what is it that only you can do? And that is a critical question to ask, because then you can shape your rest of your role around that. But you got to make sure you accomplish the big stick in order to move the organization forward. And I think when I hear you talking through this, it's like, hey, when you enter the staffing discussion, you need to understand where you're at, you understand where you're going, and then you got to figure out who's the right person to get you there is the key component in staffing. I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit.
Okay.
And you were the campus pastor of a large church, and I think you had 2 days of services on the weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 4 services in 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we talk a lot on this podcast about how do we want to help leaders advance their church while staying sane. The question I have for you is really, how did you stay sane? Because I think so often, I'll back up one more step. I think so often campus pastors they are underappreciated because they get put in so many different situations. They don't get the glory of some roles. But they're running a team, they're running a church, they're the pastor, but they have limited access to stages many times, all those type of things. And that it takes a unique person to be a campus pastor, in my opinion. And I often feel like they're underappreciated for all the work that they do. So I say all that to go, as you did it, I will tell you, you were one of the best campus pastors I've seen in those roles. What did you do just to stay sane in the midst of all that was happening? Because you've had to deal with a lot of issues on Sunday, but really also during the week.
First of all, thank you for acknowledging that I'm sane. You're assuming that I stayed sane. What did I do to stay sane?
Yeah, I wouldn't want someone to ask me that question during my time as an executive pastor.
Right.
Don't ask me that.
Yeah. If you'd asked me that in the midst of being a campus pastor, I'd have been, sanity. That'd be a great thing to have. No, it's a great question. And I think it's an important question because, the campus pastor is a unique position, right? It's all the things that you said. I think for me, and this is kudos to Chase Oaks Church, number one, is they did such a great job of prioritizing mental health and sanity and family time, all of those things over ministry. And I would tell you that healthy churches always put the person's family ahead of ministry. So I was fortunate enough to work for a church that got that right. That was very healthy, number one. And then number two is be willing to admit the things that you're not good at and ask for help. I was really good, I think, at saying, okay, I know this is part of the job description. I'm not very good at this. I'm going to need some help. And I would get that help when I would ask for it. And so be willing to be vulnerable to the point of asking for help when you need help is what I would say. And really, amazingly, and sometimes I would ask for help from the stage, right? I would ask, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need some help here. And it was always amazing to me. Number one, what authenticity with the people that were attending, what that did. It built my relationship with them because here I am admitting I'm not very good at something. I could use some help. And then allowing people to step into that space, whether it be a volunteer or a staff member, whatever it might be, but people stepping up who maybe are looking for a place to serve. And that campus pastor just said they need help in this area. And somebody sitting out there, I could help with that. I've never heard anybody ask for help in that area. So being willing to do those things, I think, is really part of the sanity. If I'd have tried to be great at everything that I was asked to do and tried to fake it, I would not have been able to keep my sanity. I'd have been burned out so quickly. And so be at a healthy church, number one, and make sure those priorities are right. Number two, be willing to ask for help. And number three, be willing to be vulnerable with where you're weak and allow people to step into those spaces.
Dan, man, I'm sitting here listening. I've seen you do that. That's the crazy part. I'm sitting here going, I've watched it and I've seen the genius of asking for help. And I've seen you admit that, hey, I don't do that. And even watching the church come in, you're talking about members or volunteers and your staff, but even senior leaders jump in and say, oh, we can help you with that and help you with supporting you through some of that. I've seen you do that in a genius way. And I think that's something that rarely do we even think about.
Right.
When we're thinking about being sane, it's like part of that is learning to ask for help. And you did a tremendous job. So I just want to say thank you for joining our podcast. It was awesome to have you here and you just add huge value. As I think of you, I often think of a guy who's just trustworthy and literally is willing to journey with people. So I can't encourage churches enough that if you're in this process of looking to go external or internal with a hire, just reach out to Dan at Group 139. He would love to help you. And what is your email so that they have that?
Yeah, it's Dan at group139.com. And then on the Group 139, the letter or the number 1 is spelled out and 39 is numeric. So group139.com.
Perfect. Dan, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Kenny.
Absolutely. And I want to say thank you for everybody who's joined us for the podcast. And it is awesome to have you here. We value your time. We know that you're busy. You have a lot going on. And our goal is simply to help you advance your mission and to stay sane while doing it. And hopefully today we helped accomplish that. So I hope you have a great day and we'll see you next time.